Okay, so this is the daf for April 16th, 2025. I was convinced by a commentator to rise up early like a lion of Zion and dispute them. So here I am. We're at daf 8 of Makkot. And it starts out, but doesn't Rav Yitzchak, son of Rabbi Yosef, say that Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz and Beit Shammai and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva all hold that the vocalization of the Torah is authoritative, not the manner in which it is written. So this idea is based on the fact that when a Torah scroll is written, it is written with just the consonants of the Hebrew and not the vocalization. There's no nakud. So the nakud, or the vocalization of any word in the Torah, is oral tradition. It is not written tradition. It is oral tradition. So any translation of the Bible you have today is actually based on that Jewish oral tradition of the how a word is supposed to be pronounced. So spiritually, we see that the consonants are the goof, or the body of what is said, and the vowels, or the vocalization of that word, is the neshama, or the spiritual aspect of that word. So they're discussing that concept. Okay, so how can Rav Hista Barashi ascribe Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's ruling to the contrary opinion? The Gemara asks, that is the reason that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to the rabbis, and furthermore, the Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to them, if the tradition of the manner in which the verses in the Torah are written is authoritative, that supports my interpretation of the verse. If not, there is an additional proof. Rav Papa said, in the case of one who cast a clod of earth onto a palm tree, and he severed dates from the tree, and the dates went upon a person and killed him, we have arrived at the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and the rabbis. In a case where one was splitting wood and a wood chip flew through the air and killed a person in that case, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi deems him liable to be exiled, and the rabbis deem him exempt from exile. The Gemara asked, isn't that obvious? The cases are identical. The novel element is Rav Papa introducing. What novel element is he introducing? The Gemara answers, the parallel between the cases drawn by Rav Papa is necessary, lest you say that these severed dates were not propelled by the force of his action, but are like an item propelled by a force generated by the force of his action. And even Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi would concede that in that case he is exempt from exile. Rav Papa teaches us that dates are considered to have been severed by the force of his action. Okay, the Gemara asks, but according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, how can he find circumstances of a force generated by the force of his action where he would be exempt from exile? The Gemara answers, it can be found in a case where one cast a clod of earth and it struck a branch of a palm tree, and the branch propelled the clod, proceeded to strike a cluster of dates, and severed the dates from the branch they were on, and the dates proceeded to kill a person. Back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah now says, one who threw a stone into the public domain and killed a person is exiled. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, if after the stone left his hand, the other person placed his head out into the public domain and received a blow from the stone, he is exempt. As when he cast the stone into the public domain, there was no one. In the case of one who threw the stone into his courtyard and killed a person, if the victim had permission to enter into there, the murderer is exiled. But if not, he is not exiled, as it is stated with regard to the cities of refuge. And as one who goes, and as one who goes into with his neighbor into the forest, Deuteronomy 19, verse 5, from which it is derived, just as with regard to a forest, the victim and the assailant both have equal permission to enter there, so too with regard to all places that the victim and the assailant have permission to enter there, the killer is liable. This serves to exclude the courtyard of the homeowner where the victim and the assailant do not have permission to enter there. Since the victim had no right to enter his courtyard, the unintentional murderer is exempt from exile. Abba Shaul says, another halacha can be derived from that verse. Just as the cutting of the wood that is mentioned in the verse is optional, so too all those liable to be exiled are examples of cases where the unintentional murderer was engaged in an activity that is optional. This serves to exclude a father who strikes his son, and a teacher who oppresses his student, and an agent of the court, deputized to flog transgressors. If, in the course of performing the mitzvah with which they are charged, they unintentionally murdered the son, the student, or the person being flogged, respectively, they are exempt. And this is exempt from exile, not exempt from punishment. Okay, the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches, one who threw a stone into the public domain and killed a person is exiled. The Gemara asks, if he threw the stone into the public domain, why is he exiled? He is an intentional murderer. He knows that there are generally people in the public domain and is aware that he is likely to harm someone with the stone. Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak says the reference in the Mishnah is not to one who threw a stone for no reason. Rather, it is a case where one is demolishing his wall, and one of the stones struck a person. The Gemara counters, that too is intentional, as he should have examined the other side of the wall to determine if there was anyone there. The Gemara answers, it is a case where one is demolishing his wall at night when passers-by are scarce. The Gemara asks, at night too, he is required to examine the other side of the wall to determine if there is anyone there, as although it is uncommon, people are apt to walk through a public domain at all hours. Okay, the Gemara answers, the reference in the Mishnah is to a case where one demolishes his wall into a scrap heap, and where there is no reasonable expectation to find anyone there, as it is located out of the way. The Gemara asks, what are the circumstances of this scrap heap? If it is frequented by the multitudes because it is utilized as a bathroom, he is negligent. And if it is frequented by the multitudes, although it is if it is not frequented by the multitudes, although it is a public domain, in the sense that it is not private property, he is a victim of circumstances beyond his control, as there was no reason to consider the possibility that someone was there. Rav Papa said, it is necessary to state this halacha only in the case of a scrap heap that is utilized for people to defecate there at night, but is not utilized for people to defecate there during the day. But it happens on occasion that one will sit there and defecate during the day. One who demolishes his wall into the scrap heap during the day is neither negligent, as the scrap heap is not utilized for people to defecate there during the day, nor is he a victim of circumstances beyond his control, as it happens on occasion that one will sit there and defecate during the day, which he should have considered. Therefore, his status is that of an unintentional murderer who is liable to be exiled. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, if after the stone left his hand, the other person placed his head out into the public domain and received a blow from the stone, he is exempt. The Gemara cites a related Braita. The sages taught, it is written, quote, and the blade displaces from the wood and finds his neighbor and he dies. Deuteronomy 19:5, from which it infers, quote, and finds. This serves to exclude one who presents himself and is thereby killed by the stone. From here, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, if after the stone left his hand, the other person placed his head out into the public domain and received a blow from the stone, the murderer is exempt. The Gemara asked, is that to say that the term and finds indicates an item that was there initially prior to the incident in question? And the Gemara raises a contradiction from that which is written with regard to one who seeks to redeem ancestral field that he sold. Quote, and he acquires the means and finds sufficient funds for his redemption. Leviticus 25:26. The term and finds serves to exclude one who, in order to accrue funds to redeem his field, sells a field that was found in his possession when he originally sold the field. It means that he may not sell land that he owns in a distant place and redeem land that he owns in an approximate place, or sell a low-quality tract of land and redeem with the funds accrued from that sale high-quality land. One may not exploit his right to redeem his land for his own advantage. This Braita indicates that the term and finds indicates an item that was not there at the time but presents itself later. Rava said, this is not difficult, as here, with regard to exile, the term is interpreted in keeping with the context of the verse, and there, with regard to redemption of the land, the term is interpreted in keeping with the context of the verse. There, the term is interpreted in keeping with the context of the verse. The terms and finds is similar to the verse that precedes it, quote, and he acquires the means. Just as the meaning of the phrase, quote, and he acquires the means, is that he acquires the means from now, as he had possessed the means beforehand, he would not have sold his ancestral field at all. So too, the meaning of the term, quote, and finds, is also that he finds sufficient funds from now and no earlier. Here, with regard to exile, the term is interpreted in keeping with the context of the verse, as the term, quote, and finds, is similar to a forest. Just as a forest is an entity that is there initially, so too the term and finds is also referring to an entity that is there initially. The Mishnah teaches one who throws a stone, etc. Rabbi Abba Shul derives from there, quote, and as when you go with his brother into the forest, Deuteronomy 19, verse 5. Just as the cutting of wood mentioned in the verse is optional, so too all those liable to be exiled are in cases where the unintentional murderer was engaged in an activity that is optional. One of the sages said to Rava, from where do we know that the derivation is from the cutting of wood and for a purpose that is optional? Perhaps the derivation is from the cutting of wood for the purpose of building a sukkah, or from cutting wood for the arrangement of wood on the altar, both of which are obligatory since they are mitzvot. And even so, the merciful one states, let him be exiled. Rava said to him, since if one found wood already cut, he does not cut another wood as in that case, it is not a mitzvah to cut. Now, when there is no wood to cut as well, although he is cutting wood to facilitate the fulfillment of a mitzvah, the act of cutting the wood itself is not a mitzvah. Ravina raised an objection to the opinion of Rava from a clause in the Mishnah that states that the example of the forest serves to exclude a father who strikes his son, and a teacher who oppresses a student, and an agent of the court. So let us say with regard to a father who strikes his son, since if the son was learned, that is, it is not a mitzvah to strike him. Now in a case where the son is not learned, and the father strikes him to facilitate his education too, it is not a mitzvah, and therefore he should be exiled. Rava replied, there, even though the son is learned, it is a mitzvah to strike him from time to time, as it is written, chastise your son, and he will give you rest, and he will give delight to your soul. Proverbs 29:17. Rava then said, that which I said is nothing, as there is a different proof that the verse is not referring to cutting wood in fulfillment of a mitzvah. It is written, and as when one, the asher, goes with his neighbor into the forest. Based on the term asher, which indicates that the entering into the forest may or may not occur, what is the nature of the forest mentioned in the verse? It is a place where if one wants to, he enters the forest. If one wants to, he does not enter. And if it enters your mind that the verse is referring to one who cuts wood to fulfill a mitzvah, would it suffice if he did not enter the forest? He must enter the forest to fulfill the mitzvah. Rav Ada Barahava said to Rava, is it so that whenever the term asher is written in the Torah, it is a case where if he wants to, he does so, and it is not referring to a mitzvah or an obligation? If that is so, that which is written, and a man, asher, becomes impure and does not purify himself, and that soul shall be excised, as he has impurified the sanctuary of God. Numbers 19, verse 20. That can be referring only to a case where if he wants to, he becomes impure. And if he wants to, he does not become impure. But in the case of a corpse with no one to bury it, a met mitzvah, where would it not suffice for him not to become impure in the process of burying it? Would you say, so too he is exempt from the punishment of karet if he enters the temple in a state of impurity? Rava replied, there it is different, as the verse states with regard to one impure with impurity imparted by a corpse. Amid Beit, he shall be impure. Tamei yeh, Numbers 19:13, indicating that the same halachot apply in any case unrelated to the matter in which he became impure. The Gemara challenges. He requires that verse for a different derivation, as that which is taught in Braita. The phrase, quote, he shall be impure, serves to include one who immersed that day, in whose purification process will be completed at nightfall. If he enters the temple before nightfall, he is also liable to receive karet. The phrase later in that verse, quote, his impurity is upon him, serves to include one who has not yet brought an atonement offering to complete the purification process, such as a leper or a tzav. Rava said to Ravina, I said that the halacha that one rendered impure by a met mitzvah is liable to receive karet is derived from the extraneous term yet. And the phrase later in that same verse, his impurity is yet upon him, which indicates the one is liable for entering the temple in a state of impurity regardless of the manner in which he became impure. That is one version of the discussion. Okay, some teach this exchange with regard to this baraita. Quote, in plowing and in harvesting you shall rest. Exodus 34:21. Rabbi Akiva says, this verse is referring to the sabbatical year. The Torah does not need to state the prohibition against plowing during the sabbatical year or harvesting during the sabbatical year, as it is already stated, quote, you shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. Leviticus 25, verse 4. What then is derived from this verse? Rather, it is derived that even plowing on the eve of the sabbatical year, which facilitates growth of crops when the sabbatical year enters, and the harvest of crops that grew during the sabbatical year, which emerged and were reaped after the conclusion of the sabbatical year, are prohibited. Rabbi Yishmael says, this verse in Exodus is not referring to the sabbatical year. Rather, the reference is to plowing and harvesting on Shabbat. Just as plowing is optional, as there is no case where there is a mitzvah to plow per se, so too the harvesting mentioned in the verse is optional. This serves to exclude from the prohibition of harvesting the barley for the Omer offering, which is a mitzvah and therefore permitted on Shabbat. Okay, one of the sages said to Rava, "From where does Rabbi Yishmael ascertain that the plowing mentioned in the verse is referring to plowing that is optional? Perhaps the reference is to plowing a field to grow barley for the use in the Omer offering, which is a mitzvah. And even so, the merciful one states, 'You shall rest.'" Rava said to him, "Since if one found the field already plowed, he need not plow the field, but he may directly proceed to sow the barley in the plowed field. Clearly, even if one plows the field to facilitate fulfillment of a mitzvah, plowing is not a mitzvah per se." Ravina raised an objection to the opinion of Rava from the clause of the Mishnah that states that the example of the forest serves to exclude a father who strikes his son, and a teacher who oppresses his student, and an agent of the corn. And according to your opinion, why are a father who strikes his son and a teacher who oppresses his student excluded from exile? Let us say with regard to a father who strikes his son, since if the son was learned, it is not a mitzvah to strike him. Now, in a case where the son is not learned and he strikes him to facilitate his education, too, it is not a mitzvah, and therefore should be exiled. Rava replied, "There, even if the son is learned, the father is performing a mitzvah by striking him from time to time. As it is written, 'Chastise your son, and he will give you rest, and he will give delight to your soul.'" Proverbs 29:17. Rava then said, "That which I said is nothing, as there is a different proof that the verse is not referring to plowing that is a mitzvah. Based on the juxtaposition of the two, it is derived that harvesting is similar to plowing, just as in the case of plowing, if one found the field already plowed, he need not plow, as there is no case where there is a mitzvah to plow per se. So too with regard to harvesting as well, as if one found the barley already harvested, he need not harvest. And if it enters your mind that the reference in the verse is to plowing and harvesting for the purpose of a mitzvah, is it so that if one found the barley already harvested, he need not harvest? There is a mitzvah to harvest and bring the barley for the Omer offering. The prohibition in the verse applies only to harvesting that is optional." Back to the Mishnah. The father is exiled to a city of refuge due to his unintentional murder of his son, and the son is exiled due to his unintentional murder of his father. Everyone is exiled due to their unintentional murder of a Jew, and a Jew is exiled due to his unintentional murder of any of them, except for an unintentional murder of a Gentile who resides in Eretz Yisrael and observes the 7 Noachide mitzvot, or Ger Toshav, and a Ger Toshav is exiled only due to his unintentional murder of another Ger Toshav. So, back to the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches the father is exiled to a city of refuge due to his unintentional murder of his son. The Gemara asked, "But didn't you say in the previous Mishnah to exclude a father who strikes his son, who is not exiled?" The Gemara answers, "The Mishnah is referring to a son who is learned, and there is no mitzvah to strike him. Therefore, since the striking is optional, the father is exiled." The Gemara asks, "But didn't you say, even if the son is learned, the father performs a mitzvah by striking his son?" The Gemara answers, "This ruling of the Mishnah is stated with regard to a carpenter's apprentice. Since the father is teaching his son carpentry, not Torah, there's no mitzvah to strike him to spur him to study." The Gemara challenges, in a case of a carpenter's apprentice, his father is teaching him a livelihood, which is also a mitzvah. The Gemara answers, the reference is to a son who has already learned another craft, and since he's able to earn his livelihood, there is no mitzvah to teach him a second craft. The Mishnah teaches, and the son is exiled due to his unintentional murder of his father, and the Gemara raises a contradiction from a Baraita. It is written, quote, "And a murderer shall flee there, one who strikes a person unintentionally," Numbers 35:11, from which it is derived that one who strikes a person is exiled. This serves to exclude one who strikes his father, whose punishment for doing so intentionally is more severe than that of the standard intentional murderer. Therefore, the son is not subject to exile. Rav Kahana said, "This is not difficult. This Baraita is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, meaning the majority. Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis disagree, Sanhedrin 50a, whether a son who kills his father intentionally is executed by strangulation or by the sword." Okay, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says strangulation is more severe than execution by the sword, which is to say a son who kills his father is liable to be executed by strangulation. One who commits the unwitting violation of a prohibition punishable by execution by the sword, intentional murder in general, is eligible for atonement by means of exile. One who commits the unwitting violation of a prohibition punishable by the more severe death of strangulation, that is, intentional murder of a parent, is not eligible for atonement by means of exile. By contrast, according to the rabbis, meaning the majority, who say execution by the sword is more severe than strangulation, why which is why a son who kills his father is liable to be executed by strangulation. A son who unintentionally kills his father has performed an unwitting violation of a prohibition punishable by execution by the sword. And one who commits an unwitting violation of a prohibition punishable by execution by the sword, meaning intentional murder in general, is eligible for atonement by means of exile. Rabbah says that which was derived in the Baraita, that one who strikes a person is exiled, to exclude one who strikes his father, who is not exiled, is not referring to a son who unintentionally kills his father, as in that case the son is certainly exiled. Rather, it is to exclude one who inflicts a wound on his father unwittingly. The novel element of this derivation is that it enters your mind to say, since a case where he wounded his father intentionally, he is liable to be executed by like a murderer, Exodus 21:15. If he did so unwittingly, let him also be exiled like an unintentional murderer. Therefore, this derivation teaches us that exile is administered specifically to an unintentional murderer, but it is not administered to the unwitting performer of any other transgression. The Mishnah teaches everyone who is exiled due to their unintentional murder of a Jew, and a Jew is exiled due to his unintentional murder of any of them. The Gemara asks, everyone is exiled due to their unintentional murder of a Jew. What case that was not already specified does this phrase serve to add? The Gemara answers, it serves to add a Canaanite slave and a Samaritan. The Gemara notes, we learn by inference from this Mishnah that which the sages taught explicitly in the Baraita, a Canaanite slave and a Samaritan are exiled and flogged due to a Jew, and a Jew is exiled and flogged due to a Samaritan and a Canaanite slave. The Gemara analyzes the Baraita. Granted, a slave and a Samaritan are exiled and flogged due to a Jew. Either of them is exiled in a case where he killed a Jew unintentionally and flogged in a case where he cursed the Jew, thereby violating the Torah prohibition. But with regard to the halacha that a Jew is exiled and flogged due to a Samaritan, granted, the Jew is exiled in a case where he killed the Samaritan unintentionally, but the Jew is flogged for violating what prohibition? For cursing the Samaritan, isn't that prohibition derived from the verse, quote, and a leader in your people you may not curse, Exodus 22:27, from which it is inferred that the prohibition is in effect only with regard to one who performs an action characteristic of your people, who performs himself, who comports himself as an observant, God-fearing Jew. Even if the conversion of the Samaritans was valid, they regularly violate numerous prohibitions, and they do not comport themselves as observant Jews. Rather, Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, this Baraita is not referring to lashes administered for cursing. Rather, one is flogged in a case where a Jew testified against a Samaritan, and a Samaritan testified against a Jew, and he was rendered a conspiring witness. Gemara asked, does that mean that in a corresponding situation with regard to a Canaanite slave, a slave is flogged in a case where he testified against a Jew and was rendered a conspiring witness? Is a slave eligible to give testimony? Rather, Rav Acha, son of Rav Ika, said, what are we dealing with here? The Jew is flogged due to a slave, and a Samaritan and a slave and the Samaritan are flogged due to the Jew in a case where one struck the other with a blow. And now that's the end of Daf 8. It continues into Daf 9 for tomorrow. Thanks for watching.